we can't forget the people. So the technology is sexy. Everyone is building requirements and focusing on the technology. But what I and my teams do is we come in and look at the people impact.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Growth Blueprint. I am your host, Tabitha May-Tolub, here with my amazing co-host, Master Christopher Rappold. Hey, Chris.
Hello, Miss Tabitha.
We are very excited. I know we always say that, but we have an incredible guest for y'all today. Miss Kat is in the house. How are you today, Kat?
Well, good morning. How's everyone?
See, you can tell right from her good morning, we are in for a good episode here. Let me tell you about Kat a little bit. So Kat Aleem Young is a high energy, fast paced strategic coach who is reimagining the future of work. She's a global people and culture strategist with 12 plus years of cross-industry experience in digital transformation, change management, organizational design, and business process improvement in the tech, transportation, aerospace, nonprofit, and startup scale-up space. All the things. Kat's passionate about rolling up her sleeves and diving deep with leaders to unlock barriers for growth and create breakthroughs for teams solving complex business challenges. She's a unique partner with background in big firm management consulting, sports psychology, transformational leadership, neuropsychology, and team coaching. So I think you all can see just from that one paragraph why we are excited to have Kat here. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So,
Appreciate
Kat, we're so excited, and I get to ask the first question. And Tabitha, I'm going to say, is Kat our first guest where aerospace came up?
I think so. That might be a unique niche we've got going on.
Yeah, there we go. So, Kat, the first question is: you've worked across industries from tech to aerospace to nonprofits. So, I think the question that I'd like to ask is, how has that range of diversity shaped your approach in creating environments where leadership and character can thrive?
Thank you for that question. Yes, a range of industries, and I think it's also important to know how I enter those industries. So typically, I'm coming in with a laser focus around people strategy. So businesses across industries want to do transformative things, and generally, I come in around technology, large, big, multinational firms trying to change their strategy and technology direction. We can't forget the people. So the technology is sexy. Everyone is building requirements and focusing on the technology. But what I and my teams do is we come in and look at the people impact. So that gives me the opportunity to have discussions and questions with senior leaders around the change that's going to impact the people at every level of the organization, whether it's leaders, whether it's middle manager directors, whether it's frontline leaders of their own functions. So I get to push and ask those difficult questions around people and change impacts. So when you talk about people, you get an opportunity to bring in concepts around alignment and psychological safety and these questions that don't often get answered when we're building the strategy for the technology. So it's exciting. My role, I get to push and prod, and it's exciting.
Yeah. Do you? I have to imagine that as leaders, I run a small organization, and even though it's not multinational and tech and all of that, there's times where I'm so in my leadership head that even in my organization, Kat, I don't necessarily stop to think about how that will affect everybody in the organization. And I think I'm getting better at that, but we all need each other because of our own blind spots. So I have to imagine you're doing quite a service for these people that are running multinational firms. because I would guess their skill set is to think about the vision for the company, but
Right.
oftentimes skipping over those that impact. How is that received, and you know how do you bring that across in a way that elevates its importance?
Chris, it's a great question. I think you bring up 2 points. What is the skill and capability of leaders, right? When leaders are driving so much in the organization, they're dealing with so many different factors. Well, one thing that we do is we take a look at what in the new vision and the new strategy, what is it that people need to work? Let's say there's new technology or a new way of doing things or new customers. What is it that different roles need to achieve the organizational's success marks?
Mm-hmm.
And then, based on what they need, what is it that they're capable of doing today? And where are the barriers? And so it's a methodological approach where we take a look at priority areas first, usually, and we say, okay, the business is going to change in these facets. What are the tools and capabilities that our people need to be able to execute? And so if we're going across the business in a very methodological way, and leaders are able to sit in on these conversations. So it's a facilitated conversation. It isn't just the leader going around the organization, it's groups of individuals, groups of stakeholders talking through together, aligning around these challenges. And through the process of conversation and oftentimes tension, it's like balancing the tension, balancing the requirements and the needs of different stakeholders in the business. Through that process over time, and it doesn't happen overnight, you're able to really listen to the various perspectives and the voices. So it really is methodological and organic because things come up
Yes.
unexpectedly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's wonderful. I love the word how you're using it, stakeholders. I think that's so important, and I have to imagine it's refreshing too. Though there's some resistance at first, perhaps, but I have to imagine that it's a level of insight and just a refreshing feeling for the visionary of that company to feel realigned and attached to the people that are doing the work. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
And I
wonderful.
pull the thread on 2 words that you use: resistance.
Hmm.
So, in some cases, resistance is perceived as negative. Let's say if we all have had adolescents in our life, whether now, in the past, or in the future, they are known for resisting, right? Resisting structure, resisting the order, and that appears negative. But if you take that same word resistance in sports, in resistance bands, resistance work, that gives us a different connotation. We know that that resistance is helping our muscles to be
Mm,
stronger. Our total body wellness will be
mhm,
stronger with resistance. So, one of the things that I do when I'm entering and partnering with leaders, I reframe or solicit from the leader, what does resistance mean to you? What triggers you? Because if we view resistance as negative, then you are going to show up kind of blocking the different viewpoints that may be very harsh to hear. But where it gets really spicy and momentum is when you bring these resistant ideas and start to work through them.
mhm,
And character, which I know is one of the things we're going to be talking about, when you're grounded in strong character and your ego is strong, right? We call ego strength. You're better capable of leaning into the resistance without viewing it as a personal attack on you or lack of loyalty from your leaders or from your employees.
mhm. Wonderful.
Love that. I mean, I love this. I'm like, I can't stop thinking about this idea of resistance as strength building. I think that's such an incredible, important reframe in our spaces, right? Like this is a way for us to be stronger individually, together as an organization, but we have to
Yes.
be willing to work it out. I love that.
Yes.
Kat, I know so much of your work is really about reimagining and helping people reimagine the future of work. We all have sort of this idea about what work is and how it's supposed to feel and be. And there's really like such a new way of thinking about it. And I'm curious from your experience, what does the future of work look like? What does the future of leadership look like? And how does character play into all that?
Oh, wow.
I know that was a lot.
No, it is, but it's exciting. I mean, we're at such a inflection point around what work even is. All right. So AI, is the big player right now, and it's questioning a lot of things around value, the human value. How can it be replaced? When should it be replaced by technology and AI tools? And so, as I think about the future and in the conversations and the learning that I'm doing, um, I think about speed. I think about uncertainty, higher levels of uncertainty in the workspace. I think about the diversity of thought and experience that people are bringing. I mean, the talent that we have access to in this country and globally is fascinating. Um, I think about our workspaces feeling more like startups, even in mature organizations, because we're going to be unlearning things, rapidly trying things out to see if this is going to work. So I see rapid prototyping and then throwing some things away. Okay, no, that's not going to work. That failed. Let's move on. So, which in startup environments, this is kind of how they work. But I see our businesses and our organizations having leaning into more curiosity and trying and experimenting things. And so that means knowledge, information, and exploration isn't going to stay with one person. We're going to be working with teams, partnering with agents, definitely AI agents that will look different, for different businesses. It's going to be messy, and with that, with messiness and uncertainty, again, going back to that ego strength and that character to be able to say we don't know, you know and we've got to lean in, and we've got to bring in different voices and exchange different ideas. So there will be a need for fast decision making, but inclusive decision making, right? Not a waterfall decision making where a leader up high at the C suite makes a decision, and it goes down to another level and say, "What do you think?" And then it goes down, and then it bubbles back up. No, it's going to be more organic versus a waterfall. But resilience, I think, is another concept that is going to be infused in businesses. How do we sustain our motivation, right? How do we sustain our engagement? So, organizational health is going to be measured more closely, for sure.
So when I think about, some of the stuff you just said, failing quickly, messy, all of those things, I think about that's a lot more conflict, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I'm
That other word.
curious. Yeah, that other C word, right? I'm curious in your experience when we're in these like fail fast, get messy, inclusive decision making. What's the role of healthy conflict? How do we make sure that we're using that tool of conflict for good and not evil?
Great question. Conflict, resilience, all the things that uh, make humans a little squirrely, right? So it goes back to character, right? It goes back to character. So leaders in this future of work, or now, I say the future is now. Leaders have to foresee some of the consequences of the fast decisions. They have to be accountable for leaning into that risk, because it's going to be a balance, um, of leaning into the risk, leaning into the challenges, and searching for value creation. That's what everyone's trying to do. Um, so, what I think is going to be part of the future is character is going to be tested more and more, because in conflict, you have to be able to tell truths, because sometimes telling the truth creates conflict. However, if you're building an environment where telling the truth is okay, even if leaders are not wanting to hear this truth, if the environment, if leaders are creating environments where truth telling is expected, um, challenge is expected, resistance is expected, and guess what? Leaders can also be wrong and change course and accept bad news. So these elements of culture, which leaders drive, leaders aren't the only aspect of culture, but leaders drive culture. If we are focusing on how the leadership character needs to be developed, then conflict is going to be a natural part of the growth. Go back to the sports analogy I was using, right? We accept in any sport across the globe, we accept that there'll be conflicts with the, with the coach and the different coaches, or there'll be conflicts with the players and the coaches. We accept that that's part of how the team grows and builds a solid empire. We haven't reached that level of maturity when it comes to businesses. Leaders still seem to be, well, they're the only ones that have the answers, often in many cultures. But that's changing. That is changing rapidly. Um, and I also think in this future, we are going to be using tools more than we ever have. Um, I hope I can put some plugs in. There are some incredible tools in the startup world around culture, leadership, to help facilitate these conversations, which are so often harder for us without the tools. Um, this one tool that I would love for you all to explore, and it's changing the game on how we understand leadership, how we understand culture, and it's a focus on culture intelligence. We've talked about emotional intelligence, culture intelligence. Well, conflict and resistance is all part of culture intelligence.
I love that. Wait,
I
so
love
is
it.
there a specific tool that measures that?
Yes, yes.
Tell us, tell us, tell
Okay,
us.
I will spell it so you can actually look it up.
Okay.
It's called growdevo.ai, GROD as in David, IVO dot AI. And I can actually put you in touch with the CEO and leader of GrowDevo. His name is Greg Little. Fascinating background with leadership and culture and in consulting. And so you can reach directly. You don't have to go through me at all. At Greg, GRED, at growdevo.ai. And I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget.
We love
um,
that. We love specific tools that can help us. We love
Yeah.
it when guests have those for
yeah,
sure.
but it really is, the future is about investing in culture. The future is about paying attention to culture and leadership and character. That is now, and that is the future. And I only see it getting more amplified, which is exciting, especially with a tool like Grodivo. And Grodivo focuses on that investment and really helping as businesses or merging and acquiring other businesses. Imagine this. So we're very comfortable with understanding mergers and acquisitions. They analyze the financials, right? Everyone understands that. We hear that on the business reports. Imagine this. They're using a tool like Grodivo, and they're evaluating culture and culture fit. They're not just talking about financials anymore. This is what's happening. And it might not get the news, right? We might not see it on the local news, or Fox News, but it's happening. We are understanding the wisdom of science and people science, and this tool is backed by people science research. Um, research people science is quantitative now, not just qualitative. And that's what's exciting.
Love that.
Is
I
super
love that.
smart people coming together to crack very difficult
I think
problems and challenges.
that's so incredible. I think for so long we've seen the people side as like fluffy and woo woo and not important, and it's not. It's very concrete. It's very quantitative. It's very science based. You know,
Absolutely.
psychology and culture science and brain science is all super connected. So I love that there's these hard tools now that we can
That's
measure.
right.
Thanks so
That's
much, Greg. We'll be reaching out, Greg.
right.
All right. Next question, Kat. You've coached leaders through complex change and transformation. Can you share a moment where you saw a real breakthrough, a time when leadership growth directly impacted an organization's culture and results? And I think this question is important because for people outside of the three of us that maybe still haven't warmed up to the fact of the importance of culture, sometimes examples like this really help to bring it home. Is there one that sticks out in your mind?
Oh, several. um, it's interesting how you do work for years and there's still earlier experiences that resonate with you. Um, one of my earlier, what I would say, deep transformations where we're working not only with the leader, but we're also working within the team framework. Because sometimes as a coach, you go and you might just work with the leader. But in this particular opportunity and engagement, I was working with a leader of customer success. And the leader needed to they were adopting a new CRM tool. And the leader was having challenges with his own style and fit of the teams. He was new and he had certain expectations walking into the role, as we all do. And he realized the skill level of his teams was not where he had anticipated the skill level to be. So he knew he was leading this new CRM adoption, the way the teams, the customer success teams did business were going to look different. And so how do you upscale? How does he work on his own leadership style and ability to tolerate the growth? Because he thought he was walking into fast paced, high performing teams. So his own assessment was off around the team and he needed to align around what their true capability was. So we went in and we did a variety of assessments of his own style, his own coaching style, his own abilities, and also the knowledge level of the customer success teams. And so over time, by working with the teams and working with the leaders, we were able to see some of the key misalignments and key challenges across the teams. One of the things we introduced was play and curiosity. You know, we injected a lot of, well, let's be curious about one another, and we did some mapping of team members to understand how we could leverage different skill sets for this initiative and this change. So it really created an ecosystem of change within this department. So it wasn't just about the leader getting coaching. And so over time, I think what I can say, this was about a 6 to 8 month, if I recall correctly, engagement. And over time, the feedback that we were getting from the teams is that the leader was leaning in and listening in a different way, wasn't making assumptions, um, and was following up, doing that. You had mentioned earlier, Chris, that sometimes you don't always know what's happening on the ground because you're focusing on vision and strategy. He was changing his behavior and he was in the trenches, so to speak, spending time with the teams to really understanding the achievements. So,
Yes. There was there one of the books that was recently referenced is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was mentioned on one of our earlier podcasts, and that was my first understanding of uh, what is it, production versus production capability. And sometimes as the leader, you're so focused on production, you don't take the time to appreciate I can only go as fast
Hmm.
as the production capability, which is my people. And it really helped to solidify that. And again, it's, I think, Kat, when you, as an expert in what you do, when you go into a company, I have to imagine it's just a freeing experience for that visionary to be able to tap into the production capability that in a lot of times I'm sure it was probably a bit of a blind spot. They just didn't understand the importance of its production capability, so for you to give them that that insight, it's got to make their job infinitely easier, though maybe not as sexy. But sometimes moving slower is moving faster,
Oh, I'm
right?
glad that you said that. The combination of slow thinking and fast thinking, I think, is
Yes.
another gem. We don't like to slow down. Slow down in our American culture equates negative
Yes.
perceptions on your capability, right? If you're slow, you're not as effective. If you're
Right.
slow, you're not as capable. You're not as valuable. And yet, I've seen over and over again in various transformation engagements is that when we have an opportunity to dive deeper, we gain clarity, a new level of clarity that allows us to gain momentum and move faster. So it feels quite oxymoronic, right? To say in our culture we need to slow down to go fast. But again, I point to another area where we accept this. We accept this in the meditative world, in the yoga world. Like you think about these practices that are no longer isolated, they're more incorporated now, even in business, meditative hours or go do yoga. These things are now more incorporated in the business environment. That's telling us to take a break, to slow down, to back up, and re-engage. Now you can completely disconnect from a meditative perspective, but we can take those lessons and saying, what do we need to dive deep
Hmm.
and unpack right now, versus keep going, plowing straight ahead.
Hmm. I'm going to put nap pods at personal best. I think that's,
Nap pods. I love
you
that.
know, how nice
I
would
love
that
that.
be? But, also let me, if I may, I'd like to compliment the work that both you and Tabitha do. And let me say this about your missions. It's people see what you do, but I would say your value would double, triple, quadruple if people could see the disasters you probably saved people from because they were going fast and they were doomed for an explosion had you not tuned them in and slowed them down into production capability and character and inclusion and involvement of all of the people. People don't see, those potential disasters. And I think if people could, it would, in both cases, I think the work would be valued even more.
That's insightful.
I
What
guess I want to say I think you're worth a million.
what do you
Absolutely.
prevent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that's the question, right? Like not like why should we do this, but why shouldn't we? What happens if we don't slow down and take care of our people and make that a priority? I think that's the question that we need to be asking. Yeah, for
precisely.
sure.
And
Yeah.
especially for both of you in this culture of the grind,
Yes.
and that being so, that phrase everybody is so familiar with, I look at it and I just shake my head. We have a saying in martial arts: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. But
Mm.
you have to be willing to slow down, and I think the work that both of you do teaches people how to intelligently slow down and make decisions that are sustainable over time, not for a quarter or a month or something like that. So, bravo to both of you.
Chris, that's an excellent point that you're raising around the grind culture. Leaders, as we move forward and continue to speed along in our transformation as humans in business, leaders will need to normalize recovery. So, risk, yes, push forward, challenge, but not recklessly. So, while we're learning, we also need to be accountable for recovery.
Yes.
So, perhaps looking at sprints versus looking at everything as a grind marathon. um,
Yes.
Sprinting, focus, sprint, recovery. What did we learn? Okay, let's, when we think about language that we're all familiar with, debriefing, right? I'm just going to put the debriefing, post mortem, right? These are things that have been accepted concepts in business for years. We have not layered on top of these very normal concepts just the human aspect of let's just take a breather. But we will say, let's take a breather. What does that mean? It means you need to pause.
Yep.
So I think humans intuitively understand these concepts. We get it. We're intelligent beings. What it is that's going to take us into the future and elevate is the practice and leaders having the courage to practice what we know. And when I say courage, I'm not saying something like storming Normandy, right? That's a different type of courage. And we all understand that courage. I mean the courage to, like, wait a minute, we need to stop this conversation right now. We need to put a pause in it. I see that we're circling around. There's only two or three people talking right now. We're not really getting the the quality of discussion that we need. We're going to put a pause and we're going to come back. We're going to reschedule this in 2 days, right? That's courage to stop a flow that is going down the wrong direction. Those micro behaviors that speak to normalizing recovery, and we don't have to get everything done today, especially if we're not doing it in a way that's value, value added. Um, that's courage, micro courage every day, showing
Love
up.
that. Wow, the power of the pause, like that's profound. That's huge, and that is courage. I love that you named that in that way. Um, I'd love to go back to something you touched on briefly. You kind of dropped a nugget, and I want to go back and dive into it because I think this is under this topic of courage as well. I'd love to talk about psychological safety.
Sure.
It's something I care a lot about. I'm actually rereading The Fearless Organization, which is Amy Edmondson's book, which kind of launched this idea of psychological safety because many of my clients right now are struggling with how to create that. First of all, just to digest the topic and like make sense of it, but then how to create that on their team. So I would love if you could dive into that for us a little bit. Give us some how to's.
Hmm. How to? Psychological safety is a minefield. It is not easy, and we're throwing that phrase around, and I think we're learning as we go because it's so dimensional. Um, and there are many ways that I have facilitated and built upon psychological safety. It really depends on how I enter a consulting opportunity, because how I come to a business or a leadership group will determine how I'm able to build upon and expand the notion of psychological safety. So it really is tied to how I enter. So, for example, if I am going in for a set of coaching with a leadership team, and let's say we're doing a retreat, I have an opportunity prior to the retreat to get to know and build rapport with the individuals on the leadership team. Because typically, if I'm facilitating a retreat, we're spending several weeks prior to the retreat building up and designing, co designing the retreat. So, in that role as a co designer, as a partner, I'm able to really lean in and ask questions off camera, right? Outside of the group's ear, within the individual. And I'm able to gain a sense of where is their psychological safety on this team and where is it lacking by the questions that I ask. And again, psychological safety is not just because I think psychological safety is being co opted by some things. like bring your authentic self to work, and I think that is fine, but it is one element of psychological safety. Typically, when I dive into psychological safety, I want to know, are we able to bring up the difficult questions? Are we able to critique ourselves in our work? Um, are we able, is there trust here among the team? How comfortable do you feel across your peers and with the leaders? Um, is there something happening in the environment where trust has been lost? Right? Have there been some decisions that have been made, or behaviors or practices that are going on, that behind closed doors folks will talk about, but they won't talk about in the team? As in, I'm talking about the leadership team here. So I'm asking these questions in addition to um, authentic self, ability to share feelings and emotions and not just ideas. Right? Can you bring your whole human self? So in working with that leader, that leadership team, I'm able to ask those questions up front, so that by the time we get to the retreat, I'm able to push gently on what I heard, and I'm able to bring it in without identifying who said what, saying, here are the themes. So where do we want to work? What is a priority? And so the team itself, with people who are committed and dedicated, will begin to isolate some areas of psychological safety, and we'll begin to work and lean in on it and commit. The team has to commit. And so I ask for that when working with teams. Are you ready? Are you motivated? How motivated are you to work on this? Checking in. So that's one entry, is working with a leadership team. If I'm working with, let's say, a business, massive stakeholders, massive departments, um, psychological safety is something that, as a consultant, I'm required to facilitate and model and uphold in setting expectations and setting boundaries on how we're going to work together. That is my role, because I can't assume that psychological safety has been established when you're talking about a very messy and lots of stakeholders. I have to work with what I have, but I have to set the tone, and call it out and identify, what are the ground rules here? What are our success rules? And if something happens, then part of my role is to call it to the attention and work through it.
I love that you named that, because I do think psychological safety has become the buzzword. And anytime something becomes a buzzword, people start to be misinformed about what it really means. And it is all those things that you mentioned in the beginning. It's messy, and it's like, it's hard, and it creates some conflict. So I love that you're naming, kind of like, if you're going to do this, we got to be ready for it. We got to be ready to enter the danger. So thank you for
Right. Right. And another piece, as I was just thinking, as reflecting on language and common language, part of the tools that consultants use, like assessments, and I know one of the assessments around when you're thinking about people and how we work in the environments, I know the DISC is super popular. um, I know that there are other strengths finders that have been really popular in the past, and Enneagram, and what's the other tool?
I'm a
Tabitha,
fan of Working Genius.
working
Working
genius,
Genius is my
right?
favorite because
I'm
it's
not
cheap and it's short and it's amazing. So there's
and
my
I
plug for
and
the day.
I do want to learn more about working genius. I'm not as familiar. I've not used that in my toolkit. Psychological safety is also tied to the tools that you're using. If we are agreeing that we're using these tools and we're exploring, right? We're curious about who we are here and how we're going to get this work done, what's in the way. If we've agreed to particular methodologies and assessments, that also provides psychological safety, because we're using language that we've all agreed to, so that we're using lenses that we're looking and analyzing and understanding each other, but it feels safe because we're not just randomly choosing something. We've all agreed. So that's another piece of establishing and building psychological safety within teams and within organizations.
Kat, can I ask? Vulnerability is a word that's definitely come up in our podcast before, and Tabitha and I are both fans of Brene Brown, who I think is the person that, at least in, I would say, in the past 10 years has really, at least to my knowledge, brought that word into the forefront. But vulnerability and inclusion are often talked about, but not always lived out. What practices do you use to help teams truly embody those values of vulnerability and inclusion?
That's a great question. Yeah, because vulnerability and inclusion are not the same thing. Starts with the leaders. The work, when I have worked with leaders who are targeting some challenges within their business, I start with inviting, because there's always an invitation, um, the leader to audit themselves and feedback, right? Because how the leader sets the tone around it's okay to be vulnerable. And I'll give you an example, a very specific example. When leaders share with their teams their own performance evaluation, maybe not the entire document, but hey, these are the things I'm working on in this new quarter. It's a way to show the team I've got things to work on and I'm going to be looking for some feedback. This opens up a door to say, okay, my leader can demonstrate that there's areas of growth, upskilling, reskilling. It sets a tone of openness because that's really at the core of vulnerability is openness and trust. I'm trusting that you're going to take this openness and you're going to learn from it or you're going to be inspired from it. And then in turn, I'm going to learn from you. So that is one way that I've encouraged leaders to lean in and demonstrate with their teams um, the opportunity for growth, welcoming that.
Love that. I love it. That's such a concrete thing to do and super helpful as a leader to be like, look, I got to work on these things. Can you help me? And the only way to do that is to share. Well, this is the time in the podcast that I hate most, which is, oh my God, we're running out of time. We need to wrap up because everyone's got to go. But I'm wondering if, I know it's a lot of pressure, but in the couple of minutes that we have left, Kat, can you just give us, we've talked about so much. Can you just give our listeners one, two, or three quick core nuggets if they don't remember everything that you've given us today? What are three things that are most important in terms of leadership and character?
No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Your best wisdom in 30 seconds or less.
No pressure. Okay, this is a message for leaders. Understand your why and your motivation behind being a leader. It's okay to stop and audit yourself, audit your stress levels, audit your why, and pivot. Um, that's a very important, moving forward, it's very important to understand your why around leadership and reconnect with your why or pivot. And I'll tell a really quick story. I was working with a founder who had grown his business 10 years, investors flowing in, annual recurring revenue, um, north of 2 million. And the work that we did unpacked that he no longer felt that he wanted to be in the CEO role, that he wanted to have a niche role working and managing with the investors. And it took him maybe 6 months to figure that out because he did the work and audited what was working and his why and his motivation to lead the company. Um, and the freedom that that gave him was amazing. So know your why. Um, Measure character in your companies. You can activate character and find ecosystems to mentor, find ecosystems to grow, peer ecosystems to grow around leadership. um, you have experience and insights, give it away.
I
I'll
love
leave
that.
with that.
That was amazing. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for that. We've loved having you here, Kat.
Yeah. Kat, I want to thank you for sharing your time and your depth of experience with us. Again, aerospace, I think you're the first one to bring to have that kind of experience. So it's wonderful. It's people like you sharing your experience that allow us the valuable nature of this work to spread. I know I see the value in shining a light on this. I think having somebody like yourself come on and somebody to be able to listen to the value of engaging in these conversations and looking at business with this lens, I really believe it's going to take the conversation as somebody thinks about a business, a team, a department from, wow, that would be nice to have to know this. This is paramount. This is foundational. This is the only way we can sustain the growth that we want. And for all of the work that you're doing in your life and also for coming on and sharing your wisdom with our listeners, a sincere thank you. So, on behalf of myself, my partner, Tabitha May-Tolub, thank you all for listening. We invite people who have joined to please subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and please share the Growth Blueprint podcast with others. This will help us to continue to attract high-level thinkers like Kat on the topic of leadership and building culture. I promise you we'll continue to do our best to make sure each and every episode is packed with inspiration, strategies, and actionable steps so that you can improve the container that you're in. We look forward to our next conversation.